Monday, March 16th, episode number 172 here of Sunday Golds, a Florida State baseball podcast. Florida State dominating this weekend on the road against number 12 Wake Forest. The Noles swept the series in Winston Salem. It was incredible to watch, honestly. One of the best weekends I think Florida State has had, considering the opponent, the stakes, the matchup, the location in quite some time. Certainly under Link Jarrett, and maybe dating back 10 to 15 years when you think about the weekends that Florida State baseball has put together. I'm Ariya Masudi alongside Brett Nevitt. You know us well. We've been doing this thing now for 5 years, and it's been a lot of fun, Brett, and not many weekends have been more fun than this one. A lot to get to in this show. We'll talk about the matchup against Wake Forest, the dominant starting pitching, as well as the bats finding some power in a ballpark that is designed to be offensive, and the Noles took full advantage. So we'll get through each and every game, the things that stood out, and then we'll preview the Bethune Cookman Wildcats, the preseason favorites, and the SWAC, and a rematch of last year's opening round game of the Tallahassee Regional played at Hauser between the Noles and the Wildcats. Before we do that, Brett, we got to thank our sponsors, Alumni Hall. They've been friends of the program now for a couple of years, have made this thing possible for us, and they have a code for you, SG15. Again, that's SG15. It gets you 15% off of your entire purchase at Alumni Hall, alumnihall.com online, or you can go in store in Tallahassee. Let them know Sunday Gold sent you. Let them know you listen to the podcast, you want your favorite Noles gear, and they'll give you 15% off right there on us at the counter. So you got hats, jerseys, apparel, you name it, they got it, and so much more. A lot of cool different designs, different brands, Nike, Antigua, Champion. You know, they've got a deal right now going on, 2 for $40. You get 2 shirts for $40. So many things right now that are going on at Alumni Hall. And then we do want to also shout out Metro Deli. They've been friends of ours starting at the beginning of this year, a place that I've always enjoyed going to eat, and they're diehard Seminole baseball fans as well. Metro Deli in Tallahassee, a great lunch spot. With that being said, the bills are paid, Brett, so to speak. We can talk about the Noles taking care of the Deacons. Before we get into each and every matchup, I think of the 3 games, how satisfying was this weekend for Florida State, especially coming off of the disappointment at Florida? This feels like we've righted the ship and then some.
Yeah, I think coming off of Florida, obviously, and also just the last couple of years of playing Wake Forest, I think Wake was going for their 3rd straight series win against FSU, and those have kind of happened in not so fun fashion for FSU. So, you know, just a really impressive weekend all around. I thought, you know, in every facet of the game, they were really sharp, and it's just really encouraging for what's to come for the rest of the year. I think on the mound, you've seen really, really good signs the last 3 weeks, especially since you were able to get your weekend rotation set with Mendez, Beard, and more after Beard had, you know, the illness the first week of the season. But in the 3 weeks that you've had those guys in the weekend rotation, you know, you've gotten really good starts every single time. I can't think of a start that's been less than 5 innings in those 3 weekends. And for West and Beard to come out and set the tone the way they did was, you know, as impressive as it gets. And West has looked awesome, and Beard has looked really, really good. And, you know, I think the bats did what they needed to do. When you go to Wake, you need to lift the ball and hit homers, because that's what it calls for in a park as small as it is. I mean, some of the homers that you saw hit to right and left, like, you just feel like they never leave most of the time. And, you know, they leave Wake pretty easily. And you hit 10 home runs this weekend. And I think 9 of those home runs came from 4 guys. So you really had some of your sluggers slug for you, which you need them to do in ACC play. So first week in ACC play in the books, and I don't think it could have gone any better for FSU.
Yeah, certainly when you sweep anybody, you have done the job. We've talked about on this show many times that you typically, the expectation is to win every series. That's the goal, right? Series sweeps happen typically at home against overmatched opponents. They don't always happen on the road away from Tallahassee. Very rarely does Florida State get a road ACC sweep, and very rarely do they find one against a top 15 opponent playing in their own backyard. In a place that Wake Forest, they typically win a lot of ball games at the couch, as they call it over there. Man, Florida State came out, and I don't think there was a moment all weekend that Wake Forest had momentum. Like, there was not There was not really a comeback necessary for Florida State at any point. Saturday, you led in all 3 games right out of the get-go, and you throw 2 shutouts. That, for me, from a bird's eye view, when you can go on the road and completely take a crowd out of the ball game. I mean, they were talking on the TV broadcast about an elderly gentleman trying to put a poncho on behind home plate. Like, that's what the broadcast had turned into on Sunday. And once the game is no longer interesting, like, you've done your job as, I think, the away team when you come in. It felt to me, and I think you could even notch it up a few octaves here, but to me, like last year when we played North Carolina in Tallahassee, like pretty immediately Carolina took FSU out of the equation, right? Hauser and the atmosphere and energy and momentum. You never saw any of that. And it's because Carolina came out, and when you have starting pitching that can set the tone, Brett, you know this from your playing days and covering Florida State now for a number of years in college baseball. Starting pitching is where the tone is set forever and always. It will always be on the mound. If you've got a dominant pitcher on the mound, you're going to have a pretty good shot to control a baseball game. And Florida State did it in all 3 matchups, especially the first 2 games. It doesn't get better than what Wes Mendez, Trey Beard, and Bryson Moore did for you this weekend on the bump.
Yeah, I think this coaching staff definitely felt like the starting rotation could be the strength of this year's team. And, this first weekend of ACC play certainly showed that, and these last 3 weekends have. And, I talked about a lot last year with Wes and how highly I thought of him, and, kind of buying stock as early as I could in Wes. And last year I said I thought Wes was a future first round type of talent. And, I know there were a lot of people that questioned that at times last year, but like, as he's turning into a first rounder, in my opinion. Like, watching him against Wake, like that was amazing. Like, it was the pitch mix that he has now. The slider is really, really good. Like, it has gotten a lot better. That gyro slider he's throwing is extremely nasty. And when you pair that with the changeup as well, and then Wes's quality of fastball, and when he's commanding that, like, that's just a really, really tough ask for hitters. And at this point in the year, Wes has 41 Ks and 28 2/3 versus just 9 walks. Hitters are hitting 120 against him. Hasn't allowed a home run yet this year. Has only given up 2 earned runs so far. So as good of a start from him as you could ask for. And I just really feel like the talent is really starting to come through, and you can see him realizing it too at the same time. Like, I think Wes at this point knows how good he is, and like, there is such a stark contrast in his body language on the mound this year versus last year. Like, I felt like there were so many times last year where you could tell like Wes was lacking some confidence and was kind of questioning himself, especially once he started to struggle early in ACC play. But like, he just looks like a guy that's out there right now with complete and total confidence in what he's doing. And like, he knows he's going to go out there and dominate guys as long as he's in the zone. And Beard, I mean, the changeup is just such a unique pitch that even when hitters know it's coming, and as much as they game plan for it, like, he's able to use that thing against left-handed and right-handed hitters as much as he wants, and it just keeps him off balance the whole game. And when you add in the curveball that he's throwing a lot better, and throwing it for strikes, and then you add the fastball coming from that over-the-top angle, which he commands spectacularly, like, that's another guy that's just really tough to pick up. And, I was thinking earlier today, like, you might have the best 1-2 in the country. There's a lot of good 1-2s out there. I know Texas has some really good arms. Obviously, there's a lot of SEC programs that have really good 1-2s, but like Mendez and Beard, the way they're throwing the ball right now, I mean, Beard was the number 1 transfer portal pitcher in the country, according to D1 Baseball, and he's not starting for you on Friday nights. And that's because Wes Mendez is throwing the absolute what out of the ball, and has been since the fall started. So like, when you have those 2 guys going every Friday and Saturday, like, you feel really good about what you could do. And then when you add Moore doing what he's done to this point on the back end of that, throwing 5 2/3 and only giving up 1 run and striking out 7. And you told me the fastball climbed up to 96. Like, you're really starting to see this stuff tick up the more he's on the mound consistently. Like, you're starting to get into a point of the season where he hasn't usually gotten to before, and you hope that he continues to get there and continue to climb and throw more and more innings. But that has looked like a pretty solid Sunday starter to this point. And I think some really, really good stuff for a Sunday starter, especially. Like, it's not just someone who you're throwing out there just hoping he throws strikes and mixes some pitches. Like, you're talking potentially mid 90s with some good breaking balls, and that's what you're running out on a Sunday. So just really impressive all around from all three of those guys, not just this weekend, but for the entirety of the last 3 weekends of what they've done, and for Moore and Mendez for really most of the season, outside of one start for Moore, I think, which was his first.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be gratifying for Link and Posey, who, by the way, Micah deserves a ton of credit for the game plan this weekend against a really good Wake Forest offense that had come in mashing the baseball, to get his guys to execute their pitches at that level. But to know that when you go to bed at night that you have 3 pitchers that could be Friday night guys on many clubs around the country. I mean, Moore was trending that way at Virginia, if not for the arm injuries, right? And that's a unfortunate thing about him that he's trying to get through this year, and we're hoping that he continues to pitch healthy and can stay for Florida State as healthy as possible on the mound. He only went 81 pitches, and it's because they're extra cautious about him and making sure that he stays healthy for the longevity of the season. But I mean, it's big time stuff, man. Bryson Moore was up to 96 miles an hour this weekend with a curveball that's 3,200 RPMs, right? And a good slider and a changeup that gets better with every outing. And then Mendez and Beard, I mean, you're talking 2 guys that could get taken first and second rounds at the end of the year. And they do remind me of, the effect that Jamie Arnold and Joey Vellini had on teams last year for you. And they're not the same type of pitchers as either of those 2 guys, but you have the electricity on a Friday night, or in game 1. And I know they kept Jamie at game 2 a bunch last year, but in many ways, Jamie was still your ace. But then in game 2, and your second guy in Vellini was a craftsman, right? And that's what Beard is. He's a craftsman, and the fastball is good enough, right? At 90 to 93, he can bump a 4 when he needs to, but he's doing that to set up a changeup, and he's doing that to set up his secondaries. And at times he doesn't even set up his secondaries. He's just, here's the secondary pitches. Here's my changeup. If you can hit it, good luck. And there were multiple times I'm watching this game Saturday, and I'm going, throw him your changeup. If he hits it out, good for them. Tip your cap, because that's a big league pitch, and it's got insane arm action. And I think MLB hitters would have a tough time with it, let alone college hitters. And so it's cool to watch, right? This year's version of Arnold and Vellini you've gotten Mendez and Beard. Granted, it's mid-March. Like, we've got a long way to go in this thing, and we've got to stay healthy, and both guys have to continue to pitch at a high level. I'm not sure that you can replicate 0 runs given up between the 2 of them every single weekend, especially in the ACC. But you kind of see the blueprint, don't you, Brett? And you and I have been on this since the preseason. The blueprint for this Florida State team, especially as they try and figure out some things at the plate and a number of options that they have at the plate, and trying to figure out how those pieces best give you a chance defensively, they want to be able to rely on the starting pitching. And to me, they have been able to check that box so far, because Mendez is pitching like a first rounder. There's the attitude, right? That you need a Friday night tone setter that goes against the other team's best guy. I know Wake Forest this weekend, their best guy went second, but you need someone who's out there and is an energy and a tone setter for you. And that's what Mendez is. And then you have Beard, who is this calm, veteran, old soul out there on a Saturday, and nothing's going to faze him. And he doesn't care if he's facing a guy throwing 97 to 101, which Lavonis was, and a hat tip to Chris Lavonis. He looked every bit of a top 5 pick in a draft, which is what he's projected to be in 2 years. But he didn't care. Trey wasn't worried about it. Trey knows that he's getting guys out with his pitch mix. And Brett, he looked like Tom Glavine. I mean, it was like change up inside corner, change up outside corner, fastball high, right? Up in the zone to try and get your eyes to see it up, breaking ball down. Then it was a slider. Then he had a cutter going on Saturday as well. And it was incredible. Every time Wake Forest tried to make an adjustment and they would go, all right, he's been fastball, change up. He'd go, here's my curveball, sit down. Right? And it was a masterful craft. And it was beautiful pitching, to be honest, to pull a a quote from 11. He pitched a beautiful ball game. 11 used to say all the time. But you're in a good spot there, man. And I think the difference maker, and I'll come back to you on this, the difference maker for you in the rotation may not even be Mendez and Beard. It might be the advantage you have on Sundays with Bryson Moore throwing against another team's number 3. And there is a composure to Moore and a been there, done that attitude from Bryson that you want, right, in a game 3. And whether that's to go for the sweep, whether that's to win a rubber match, or whether that's to, hopefully you don't have to face it too many times, but you're trying to salvage a game 3 and feel good after you've lost a series to bounce back into the rest of the week. You want a guy like Bryson Moore out there, because I'm taking Bryson over most teams' number 3s every day of the week, especially when he's commanding the baseball like that.
Yeah, I don't think there's many teams, especially in the ACC. There definitely probably are some in the SEC that have Sunday starters with the stuff that Moore does. But I think we also expect Moore to have pretty good command too, on top of the stuff. And only 9 walks so far in 22 2/3. And I mean, even though he's been injured the last 2 years, he's still more of an older presence. You have all 3 of your guys in the weekend rotation are juniors who are one-time transfers. And I think especially at Virginia, what you're going to get with guys coming from Virginia, and out of Brian O'Connor's program. Obviously, he's not there anymore, but he was there when Moore was there. But yeah, Moore he always looks calm on the mound to me. It doesn't really look like he gets fazed by much, and that's what you want with a good Sunday starter. I think you always had that with like a Connor Grady. Always felt like Connor never got phased, and you just always felt like no matter what was happening, his reaction was kind of flatline. And I feel like you get that with Moore. You don't really see him like go up too much at all, like ever get too high on what he's doing, and you don't ever see him really get too down on it either, even when he's struggling. So, I think that's something that I've appreciated about him through watching the starts. And I didn't get to watch every pitch of this outing this past weekend, but he certainly is someone that's a stabilizing force for you on Sundays, where you feel like, whatever situation you're in, whether it's trying to finish off a sweep, you're in a rubber match, or trying to salvage a series, I think you feel pretty good on Sundays with Moore being that third starter for you.
Yeah, and I think there was some optimism in the program, Brett, coming into the year that they would have a better overall rotation and pitching staff than they've had in their time in Tallahassee. And it was because they felt like the collective whole and the parts they have, not just in the rotation, but in the pen, they thought would be a higher floor, so to speak, right? But they're showing you there might be a ceiling there too that's pretty high as a group if they continue to trend this way. And so admittedly, there is no Jamie Arnold on the staff, but if Mendez can give you back into the first round stuff, early second round performance, you're in a better spot than you think, right? And Wes has taken that step to, what's been impressive to me the most, Brett, about Wes, the mental state. He's admitted that he's gone to sports psychologist and he's tried to figure out breathing techniques and how he can manage games that are, kind of getting a little turbulent on him in the middle innings. And he's done such a good job of that this year, right? Of staying calm, executing pitches, understanding that at times you don't have to strike out the side. If being your own fire extinguisher on the mound means you give up a 1 run on a sac fly, or, you limit the damage and you continue to work deep into a ball game, that's also a successful outing. And he does have electric stuff. And when it's all going at the same time, like the way it was, the changeup has taken another step, in my opinion. Maybe not just stuff-wise, because he's always had pretty good stuff with the change and good action, but the command of it has been a lot better this year. And he's going to face some really big-time arms coming up in the ACC. There's going to be some big Friday nights, including the one he's about to go up against NC State, that we'll preview later this week in that podcast episode. But you need him to set the tone. And Trey Beard's Trey Beard. He's as good as it gets, man. When it comes to pitchability and makeup, like that's his hallmark to me. But yeah, I think the pitching's there. I thought bullpen was pretty good overall. You didn't have to use it a ton on the weekend, which is always a good sign. Wes making sure that you did not have to use it at all on Friday was a big deal in a 7-inning shutout, run rule victory. And then John Abraham continues to be John Abraham. I mean, that Saturday game's the one, right, that could have shifted the weekend's momentum. And you're not hitting well against Livonis. He's electric, and he's keeping his ball club in it. You get some big swings, and then you need to shut it down late. And Abraham shows you that he can do it, which I was really happy for Abe, because, I mean, Johnny 2 years ago at Wake Forest had a nightmare weekend. Like, it was not the weekend he wanted. He got rattled in that atmosphere, against that team 2 years ago. So there was a bit of a redemption arc, and I laughed at him pumping up the crowd and looking into Wake's dugout and having something to say because of the chirping that the Deacons like to do. So good for him. And then Sunday, the bullpen was okay. It wasn't great. O'Leary was a mixed bag. Meeble, not the best. We've seen it. And then Kinnear was just okay. I thought Kinnear did decent to close it out, but he had a really big lead when he came in, and it wasn't like he was shut down. Like, he gave up some hits and a long home run. But they did enough to do their job, and how many did they use overall on the weekend out of the pen? 4. I think it was 3 on Sunday and 1 on Saturday. So it's always good when you don't have to use your pen, actually. I think anybody would tell you that in any program. If you don't have to use your bullpen, you did something pretty good during the weekend. But those are my thoughts on the pitching staff as a whole.
Yeah, I was just going to add on Wes as you were talking about it, and some of the stuff that stood out to you. When I spoke to him in the preseason for this podcast, the interview we had as part of our preseason series, and I think I texted you right after I talked to him, like, I felt like Wes had focused so much on the offseason on exactly the things he needed to focus on, like exactly the things that were holding him back last year. The consistency of the secondaries, the consistency of the fastball command, and just a lot of the routine stuff. Like, he worked on his routine, his in-between start routines. He's trying to set a routine for starts on the road. I think his road starts were really, really bad for him last year. I think road and home splits were really bad. And he talked about, like, the breathing techniques and that helping him with just the consistency of his mental state throughout starts. Like, all that stuff has shown up for him through these first 5 starts of the season. And I just think so much of it is because of the offseason work that Wes put in. And I think a lot of that, comes from that last game of the season and never wanting that to happen to himself again. And he got right to it in the summer, took the summer off, worked really hard on that stuff, and it has paid off for him. And I just think it's really cool when you see guys focus on certain things and then go out and execute on it. And, that leads to their development. The only reliever I'll touch on is John. Just continues to be really, really dominant. I mean, came into the game with a 1-run lead. They didn't add the second run until the 9th. He had gotten the last down of the 7th, and then, I think stranded a 2-out walk in the 8th inning. But I mean, he's just been really good this year. 24 Ks in 18 innings, a 0.67 whip. The only person on the team with a lower whip to this point is Beard. Hitters only batting 117 against John. Hasn't given up any home runs this year. Only given up 1 run in 18 innings to this point. So, I mean, you can't ask for much better than that from a reliever at this point. I know he started the game at Florida and did walk some guys, but out of the pen so far this year, I mean, it's just been spotless and as good as you could ask for.
And you need one, right? Like, every team has a shutdown arm out of the bullpen. You'd like to have 3 or 4, but you do need to have one that you can, in the back of your mind, know, all right, if this game is in closing time, we're going to John, right? We're going to this guy. And, the coaching staff told me, like, selfishly, they would love to have John in the bullpen. There will be opportunities for him to start games on the year potentially, and he's in the mix there if they need him, for a weekend spot or a Tuesday start. But they don't have anyone else right now that they truly, truly trust to come in and 1, 2, 3, shut it down and go the 2 or 3 or 4 innings that even, like, Abraham could go 4 innings for you to close the game out if he needed to at any point this season. And that scenario may present itself. I'm not sure which weekend that'll be. NC State's got a good lineup and a good baseball team, and you still got to go to Virginia and Clemson and Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia Tech's going to be Whew, that's going to be a bear. You're going to go into a Yellow Jackets nest. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. We don't have to worry about Georgia Tech for a while, and I'm glad. But yeah, you need one. You got to have somebody you can trust out of the pen. And I think the question for Florida State outside of Abe is who else can you trust? Because they're trying to give a couple of guys opportunities, and O'Leary hasn't really stepped up to the task yet consistently to do it. Purcell has not. Stokes has not. Kinnear has not. They've shown you glimpses, right? Like they've shown you flashes of what it's capable of when it's executed and it's clicking and firing on all cylinders, but you haven't seen the consistency really from anyone other than John Abraham right now out of the pen on a routine basis. And so that's why, we talk about it's a long season and things develop. I'm sure Michael will get at least one or two other arms that can help you out. And not to mention right now, Manka's injured. So you haven't been able to use Peyton the way that you wanted and to get the big ticket involved. So, I look at opportunities for guys like Rat Vaughn and Manuel Antigua, later in the season, if they put together some good opportunities and some, appearances on the midweeks. And when they get their chances, then they could probably factor into this thing in the bullpen on a weekend before it's all said and done. So, yeah, I think the pitching, pretty good synopsis. It's not much to break down, is there, when your starting pitching goes out there and completely shoves, what was it, 20 innings out of the, almost 20 innings out of the, how many do they play? 25 innings total on the weekend?
Yeah. I think for me on the pen, you need the guys that you brought in to be your pen arms to step up. And that's Nard, Purcell, and Stokes. Like you need those guys to be guys for you under the pen because that's what you brought them in to do. And that's what would make it a complete pitching staff. And you might struggle under the pen depth wise if those guys can't give you consistency because that's what you brought them here to do.
Yeah, I mean, Meeble and Kinnear have clearly been higher on the pecking order than I think either you and I thought they would be at this point. And they've shown some really good stuff. They've had some performances that make you, start to believe a little bit in what they can do. And then they have performances where they just can't miss a bat or they can't locate what they want with their secondaries. And you go back to, all right, well, it's fine when you're up 12-5. It's not fine when, it's 5-5 in the eighth and you need a guy to shut it down and John's not available, right? And he's already been used on the weekend. And again, you're going to get to some of these series that are going to make you sweat pretty consistently, especially when we get on the road. I think fans should not expect a sweep at a top 15 opponent every single weekend from here on out. But certainly if Mendez and Beard and Moore all pitch to the level they're capable of, I mean, you got a shot in any series you're in. Doesn't matter where you're at. Hauser, away, Planet Mars, you got a shot. So good stuff from the pitching staff. Hat tip to Micah Posey, hat tip to the starting rotation. Johnny Abraham, another job well done. But we should tip our cap to the offense too. And 10 home runs this weekend against Wake Forest, a park that admittedly is very small. And with the wind blowing out 2 out of the 3 days, played even smaller than that. There were times, again, when you just lift the ball into a jet stream and you watch that thing go. And both teams had a couple of doink home runs, as I call them. And they're pretty funny when they happen. Luckily for Florida State, when Wake hit them, the game was already in, out of reach for them for the most part. But you need to see this from the offense. I do think what I took away from the offense this weekend, Brett, and this will open up a pretty good discussion. One, macro on the style of the offense and how they may have to be successful on the year. And then 2, we can talk about personnel and the different guys who got opportunities and what Link continues to have to try and sift through with the number of options that he has, at the plate. So big picture, you're going to have to hit home runs. This group, to have the big inning, the way that it is now in college baseball, you're seeing a lot of high octane with guys throwing 95 and harder. And Wake Forest probably, I don't want to speak too soon because I haven't done all my research on every team in the ACC, but I'd be willing to bet there isn't another program in the ACC that has the collection of stuff, pure stuff, that Wake Forest is going to run at you. There are some good staffs that can really pitch it. I think NC State's going to bring a staff in this weekend that is been off to an incredible start for Elliott Avent. But Brett, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The pure stuff. I mean, is there another program in the ACC that runs that many dudes throwing 95, 97 to 100 collectively? I mean, they ran out maybe one arm that wasn't 95 plus all weekend.
Probably not. No.
Right, as a collection. That doesn't mean that they're all ready to pitch at this level and they're still working through some things and they're young. But I think you saw it throughout the weekend, man. Some of those guys have fastballs that are electric and some breaking stuff that, you know, it's going to be pretty tough to hit if they're locating the fastball for a strike. But you're going to have, the point being larger is that in this day and age, to have the big inning, I think you have to run the ball out of the park. It's going to be some innings where you strike out 2 or 3 times, but if you can run the ball out, you know, with a guy on base, and the Noles did that this weekend, you have the chance to still be pretty successful overall offensively. I still had reasons for concern as a group. They struck out 32 times in 3 games. That's a lot. Credit to Wake. They do have, again, they have arms that are capable of missing some bats, but I still think there's a lot of swing and miss in there. And so if you're going to have that and to have those big innings, I do think you need to run the ball out of the yard. And it was really good to see Putnam hit 3 of them out this weekend, to see Dowd back in there fully healthy, and doing what he does. The versatility of Dowd, can hit in the middle of your order, can hit leadoff. And then you got a couple homers from Bailey and Shmela too. And Shmela was the surprise, right, of the weekend, who got the start in all 3 games. And Carnes is dinged up a little bit right now, but Shmela came in there, and I think he left no doubt for the time being on who needs to start, right? Like right now, there's no way you can take him out of the lineup with the way he's playing. Threw out a base runner at second base on the weekend too. And overall, I thought he played really well. But 10 home runs on the weekend, man, that's what it's going to have to be. And after a slow start, I think with the power on the season, it's good to see the Noles have an uptick in some of the long balls.
Yeah, with the metal bats the way they are now, and the baseball flying the way it does, and all the parks in the ACC that are as small as they are, like the home run is the name of the game, and you got to hit them or else you're going to struggle offensively. And that is where the big inning comes from most of the time. It's tough to string hits together. You just got to hope to run the ball out of the park most of the time. And you have guys that can do that in this lineup, and they showed that this weekend, especially, you know, at Wake. But you also have Clemson coming up, which is basically just as small. That's late in the year, but you also play at Georgia Tech. I want to say you play at Virginia as well, and Virginia is not a very big park either. Like I think it's 390 to center there too. So like there's
cookie cutter parks, right? Like there's parts of the parks that are hard to homer in. It's like Hauser in some assets.
Yeah, and I think the way they've built this lineup now, they do, you know, it is still overall not a very old, experienced group, but like you did bring in some older, just stronger, just experienced guys that are going to be able to hit home runs in these parks, like Putnam and Dowd and even Nate. Like Nate is I think he's a 6th-year guy, I want to say, because he had both a redshirt year and a COVID year at Dartmouth when they didn't play a year at an Ivy League. And like he is a strong kid. And when you have that many at bats and you put the ball in the barrel and you are that strong, like you're going to hit some home runs. And Putnam, you know, I think we're starting to see the numbers of production start to match the contact rates. Like there were just so many hard hit balls with him that were ending up in gloves at Hauser for a really long time. And some of those same exact probably batted ball data, like some of those same exact contact, you know, rates turned into home runs at Wake's Park, and they'll continue to turn into home runs at other parks and at Hauser too as it gets warmer. And I mean, the multi-homer game for Putnam on Friday was his 8th career multi-homer game. You know, I was looking at his game logs from Davidson, and it was pretty crazy. I think he had 5 multi-homer games last year, and I want to say 3 of them were in one weekend, and one of the home games was a 3-homer game. So I think he had 7 home runs in one weekend. And then Dowd, you know, I was thinking about it going into the series a little bit. Just like Dowd is someone that can do a lot of damage homer production wise in these parks because of the barrel rates. Like think about all the balls that he hit hard in the air throughout the first 4 weeks of the season or 3 weeks when he was healthy. I mean, I think about some of the balls he hit out in Texas that didn't turn into home runs, that one he hit off the top of the fence, or a couple of fly balls he hit to center. Like, he's someone that consistently puts the ball on the bat and consistently lifts it, and just at a really optimal launch angle pretty consistently. So he's someone that's going to run balls out of the yard. And then obviously Miles is Miles, and everybody knows the 60 grade power that's there. So, which is really 80 grade, but it's pretty silly what he can do to a baseball. The ball he hit out when the wind was blowing out to center in the first game of the weekend, I don't know where that ball landed. I don't even think I saw it, and don't really know why the center fielder even moved towards it. But yeah, you did enough this weekend offensively. Obviously, the first and last game, you scored double-digit runs. In that middle game, Livonis did what he did, but you scratched a run against him with Schmelia's home run, and were able to add insurance in the ninth. So just able to do enough in that game, and then really did a good job in the first and third game as well.
Do you like the comparison? So the TV broadcast did a comparison between Nick Kurtz and Miles Bailey at the same stage of their careers. Not necessarily what Nick Kurtz has become, which is one of the best first basemen in the majors. But do you like that comparison in terms of where those guys were at similar ages in their second years in college?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I'm just trying to look up Kurtz's strikeout numbers. Yeah, I don't think Kurtz really ever struck out as much as Miles has to this point in his career. Now they both are walking around the same exact rate. Not saying that like Kurtz did strike out some. He had 50 his second year there in 56 games. Miles is still striking out a good bit. I think he has 23 strikeouts in 60 at bats. But he does have 24 walks, one more walk than strikeouts as well. I don't hate that comparison, and I feel really, really good about what Miles is doing defensively at this point. Probably even a better defender than Kurtz, I think, maybe. I mean, we'll see how Kurtz develops as a defender, but yeah, I mean, it's not a bad comparison. Obviously, they're both left-handed, really strong. Miles might be a bit more strong and powerful than Kurtz, but you probably can argue that Kurtz has a better bat to ball. But both of those guys are guys that have a really good eye and are going to walk a ton and hit a lot of home runs and produce the way that you want your left-handed slugging first baseman to produce.
Yeah, it was Darren Bott and Devin Travis were doing the game on Sunday, and Darren and Devin are both good friends, and they had talked to Link, and that's where it came up was, the comparison between Kurtz and Bailey. And I think Link had said, less swing and miss for Kurtz at the same age, but more power probably from Bailey at that stage in their careers. And I've had conversations with Link myself about Nick Kurtz and how he felt like we had a couple of years ago, we did their series in Tallahassee, and I was talking about Brock Wilkin and how good, Wilkin was at third base. And he was telling me, the Kurtz kid might be the best bat I've ever seen at that age in the ACC. That's what he had said. He said Kurtz has still come in, he was still on the way up and on the trajectory. And obviously now 2 or 3 years later, Link was pretty right about what he was evaluating there when they were scouting guys like Kurtz. So I'm very fascinated to see where Miles is in 2 or 3 years, because I think we'll look back at it and go, do you remember when we covered Miles Bailey? Right? Like that, I think he's going to be in that conversation in a couple of years. We got some questions from YouTube. So we'll get into those. Those of you listening on the pod, we're also available to watch on YouTube live when we record these things now. But let's see. We'll start with Grant Wilk 52, who says, does Schmela get the nod behind the plate until he struggles? And we touched on that a little bit, Grant. But I think you're right. I don't see how you can take Nate out of the lineup at the moment. And judging by Link's history and his typical routine is to let guys play when they're on and when they're hot. So I would expect Nate in there for a little bit until he proves to either, go one way or another, at the plate, hot or cold. And then it's going to be tough for Carnes, man. Like, I don't know what you were telling me earlier. So Brett, Carnes is still hitting 357, right? Which is like top 3, top 4 on the team. Wow. What do you think? I mean, it's hard to take Schmale out right now, but Carnes is one of your prospects, and was supposed to be one of the centerpieces of your lineup.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's hard to know exactly what's going on with Carnes health-wise right now, just because nobody was there to do like post-game press conferences with Link at Wake Forest, so don't know for sure if it was coach's decisions the whole week to keep Carnes out of the lineup throughout the weekend. I feel like definitely on Friday at least it was probably a resting health thing, but don't know for sure about Saturday and Sunday. So that is part of it, and we don't know exactly where Carnes is at now. Like, is he fully healthy, and can he be in that starting lineup for you? But like you said, he is hitting 357 this year. It is the defense that you're obviously more concerned about to this point, I think. Also, Carnes hasn't come through in a lot of opportunities with like a guy on third base and one out. Like, I feel like he's had a handful of strikeouts in those opportunities, and only having 2 RBI so far this year, hitting in the portion of the lineup that he does is kind of telling of that. Some of that's also because he doesn't have a homer yet. And, we felt like he hit some balls early on that later in the year would have been home runs. But at this point now, Nate has hit 2 home runs in a smaller sample size, and did throw out Shavar Williams for just the second time this year in 19 attempts for him. It's kind of, an interesting looking throwing style, but whatever gets the job done, gets the job done. Carnes throwing, it has looked awkward to me recently. I don't want to say the word, but it has looked a little Y word to me. It almost looks like he's like changing his arm angle or something, maybe like going through a change in how they want him to throw. But it just seems like the ball has popped up out of his hand and kind of skied to center field a few times. And I felt like there was some times where he was kind of pushing the ball back to the mound on the throws back to the mound. And that was when I started to get a little concerned with the Y word. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Carnes is hitting 357 and the talent that is in there, but you don't want teams to run on you throughout the year at will at the same time. I do still think you need to see a little bit larger of a sample size with Shmelia behind the plate and see if teams will run on him as well. And I think it will help you start to figure out a little bit more. Is it also your pitchers that aren't just, controlling the running game well? I think Williams got a pretty bad jump on when Shmelia threw him out, but it was an accurate throw. So really interested to see what Link says on Tuesday after the game about just Carnes' health situation right now and if he is like fully available, and just, obviously see if he's in the lineup Tuesday. But if he's not, I think Link will be asked about it after the game.
Yeah, and Walt TQ4N on YouTube's right. The ball to the throat was pretty scary. I don't know if you saw that one, Brett. That was, I think, the Sunday game. He took a wild pitch that one hopped right into the Adam's apple underneath the cage of the face mask, and he looked like for a second that he couldn't breathe. And I was worried about it because it clearly looked like, oh boy, that hit me somewhere that I don't have protection. To his credit, he's a 6th-year senior and he's tough as nails. And yeah, that was a scary moment there, but glad to see he was okay. My guess is that Link doesn't like playing any catcher 3 games in a row if he doesn't have to. And I do believe there was somewhat injury to Carnes this weekend that made him unavailable, mixed with the combination of Shmela playing well. So I think going forward, you have a 4-game week this week. I'd be willing to bet you the guys will split it 2 and 2, one way or another. Or it might be 3 and 1 with Shmela gets 3 and Carnes does get 1 back in the weekend. And that's going to keep playing out. If Carnes plays against NC State and hits a home run with 4 RBIs and is 3 for 4, that starts to put more on the plate of Link to have to figure it out. And I think they're going to seesaw, so to speak, until one takes the job over the other. That's my best guess. And it's a good problem to have if you're Florida State, because that means you're in a good spot there, a catcher, and the options that you have. Let's see. There was another question here. Wombat 24 seemed like there was a few guys that were a little impatient at the plate and just swinging at a lot of pitches they normally lay off of. Do you think this was a nerves or a bigger concern? I don't think it was nerves. You got to remember, this is probably like the best pitching Florida State will have faced in 1 week, with Florida and Wake in terms of stuff wise. All on the road, all guys throwing upper 90s with ridiculous breaking balls. Brett, they brought in a guy that was like low 3/4 slot 97, and I couldn't believe it that, luckily he couldn't throw his breaking ball for a strike consistently, but like, man, it's really hard to step into the box and see 96, 97 to 100. It's just not. Ask Team USA and the Dominican last night, how hard it is to see that velocity. And these are Hall of Fame hitters, right? Like it's tough when it's located. You don't got a shot, and that's why good pitching beats good hitting. And I'm curious. They're going to face another really good staff, Wombat, here in NC State. I actually think it might be the number 1 ERA staff in the ACC coming in. The Wolfpack are. So I've been doing my research on them to get ready for that broadcast that I've got all 3 games this weekend. But Elliot Avent has a really good team again, like he always does at NC State. And I do have my concerns about the offense. As I said, I think there will be a lot of swing and miss this year. On that, I just think that's going to be the name of the game. That's why I said you've also got to hit these home runs to be able to mitigate some of that and really do damage on single pitches. And I think this weekend showed you have a lot of options capable of doing that. Can I add one thing, Brett? Paulino has to play. I am convinced, and I have been since preseason, but even more so, he doesn't strike out. He puts the barrel on the ball, and it's like every game he hits, he has 2 or 3 hits. And I think now he's hitting 410 on the year. And listen, man, if it's DH, it's DH. I don't know what you do there. I don't know if you got to find a spot for him in the field, but those hitters don't grow on trees. Like that's not usual for every program to have that type of pure hitter, man. And I would love to see them get more opportunities for Paulino on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think I would give him a stretch like you gave Sheffield, like a 3-week stretch where it's just like he's consistently your DH, and just especially if you don't feel like you trust him in the field at this point, which it seems that way since we haven't seen him out there in a starting role. But yeah, he just continues to hitting 410 on the year. He's not technically a qualified hitter, but if he was, he would be leading the team in average to this point. 16 hits and 39 ABs, only 2 strikeouts in those 39 ABs. Also only 1 walk. He is a free swinger, but he is a free swinger who puts the ball in play at a high rate and hits the ball hard at a high rate. So, yeah, I think at a certain point, I would just like to see him be consistently in the lineup and just have a stretch where, you don't have to feel like if I go 0 for 4 today, I'm going to be out of the lineup tomorrow. Like, I just think you just let him run with it for a while and you feel like you're going to get a pretty consistent production. But to me, it would just be like Dingus was your DH for all of 2024. Like, to me, I would just plug Paulino in there and say, like, this is our DH. Everybody else battle for the rest of the positions at this point. If you're one of those outfielders, you just got to play better than the other outfielders to win one of those spots.
Yeah, and that goes back to the number of options FSU has. And I don't know what's going to happen when everybody gets healthy. Chef was playing really well, and I thought he was a little unlucky on Friday, hit a couple of baseballs hard and, just didn't get rewarded right. Sometimes you hit it right at people, and I'll be interested to see when this team gets healthy, right? When Frazier comes back and he looks to be close, and Estes, if he gets, to come back this year and has an opportunity, and then what they do with Brody fully healthy and Chase and all these guys, I don't know. The hard part about playing at Florida State, and the question here from a hopeless romantic, on YouTube. Cal struggling. What do you think happens when and if Frazier comes back? The hard part of a place like Florida State is there's a lot of talent and there's only so many opportunities. And it's going to be the best man winning, right? And getting opportunities, and it's not going to stay that way. And Link has shown you in his career, he'll play the guy that's in form and hot and playing it well. And that's not just hitting, it's defense, running the bases, the way he is as a teammate, how he affects the rest of the dugout, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if Cal played a solid shortstop this weekend, he had a couple of mistakes. One on Sunday, I think, to turn a double play that would have gotten Bryson Moore out of the inning and gotten him through 6 complete. But Cal also had a diving catch at short and a nice bare hand running in on a ball, bare hand, off balance throw to get a kid out too. And so, I'm not sure what they'll do with Frazier. I mean, and Cal, and I'm not sure when Estes comes back or Bavaro, what that plan is. Putnam to me has played well enough at second base to take away some of that concern of him defensively. He's not ultra athletic. He's not going to get to everything. He had a mistake, I think, on Brett. Was it Sunday or Saturday? If you saw it, it was Saturday. If you didn't see it, it was Sunday. But he had a ball coming to him on a slow chopper that could have been a double play ball. And he looked up at the runner to try and scoop the ball and tag him in the base path. And instead he let the ball go under his glove and into right center field, which, yeah, there were moments you go, all right, that if this is a 4-4 ball game and you do that, we're going to be in trouble. But he's also made some pretty nice plays, especially the balls that are hit right to him. And he has a pretty good glove. And yeah, I mean, he's hitting. If he hits 15 to 20 homers for you this year, got to be in the lineup, got to have it. And so that's one spot I think that's locked down. And then Frazier's really toolsy. I still believe Cal's going to figure it out. For whatever reason right now, so many people are down on Cal, and I know he's not off to the start that he wants. I still believe the track record, man. I still believe in a kid that's done it before and has shown you in big moments he can come through. And I think at some point this season, Cal will be on a heater, and that average will start to go north. And you remember this, Brett, from covering Cal now for a couple of years. He goes on heaters, raises his average 30 or 40 points, and then he's on a cold spell, and it drops his average back down 20 or 30 points. And then he hovers at the end of the season at about 290 to 310. And overall, you're like, it was a pretty good season for Cal Fisher at the plate. But yeah, I mean, that brings up a larger question, man, not just about Cal or any specific player, but now Carnes is thrown in, has been thrown into a loop with Shmela playing well. How does this team go about finding the best 9 or 10 that can play on a regular basis, say when we get to the month of, May and especially early June?
I mean, I think that it always ends up figuring itself out, whether that happens through guys going down, which we've already seen this year, or just the way guys perform throughout the entirety of the season. When it comes to Cal, personally, I think however many games you play this year, Cal's going to start every single one of them. I don't personally believe that Link is going to take Cal out of the lineup. I think he's just too important to what they're trying to do as a unit. Defensively, especially when he's out on the infield, he's the guy that knows more so than anyone what they're trying to do, especially short game stuff and stuff like that. I will be interested to see if when Frazier comes back, what they do between short and third, between Cal and Frazier, just because, we saw them switch them up just before Frazier did get hurt and Frazier was playing some shortstop again. So we'll see, how they feel about that when you get Frazier back. And also how you feel about, Frazier versus Bavaro, because like you said, I think you feel pretty good about Putnam at this point, unless the defense were to go haywire. But I think the strikeout rate for Putnam has dropped a lot since the first few games that he was in there. Only 13 Ks at this point. I feel like he was at 11 like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, he's not giving you any reason to be concerned or think about pulling him out. If anything, you feel like he's starting to work into being more of a sure thing in the lineup. And you saw that as he moved up to what I think he hit second on Sunday. So yeah, I mean, the whole 1 through 9 thing, like, you still have Chase. Like, do you want to get Chase back involved in this? Maybe, like, do you think about a super athletic lineup of Stetzer, Chase, and Dowd. I know a lot of people just kind of want to stash Chase away and just not give him any more chances because of how he was hitting. But like, you still have that in your back pocket. And if it were to get going, it'd be, that would unlock a whole different element to your lineup to go along with some of this power that you have. So yeah, still a long way to go. That was still, you 9 more ACC series to go. Like, I think all that time, it'll figure itself out, and that will be what tells you what your best 9 is when you get to, the most important part of the season.
No doubt. I think we're going to have this conversation so many times over the next couple months, and what does FSU do? And I think Link has to figure that out, right, with his staff. And it's a feel thing sometimes. Sometimes one coaching staff would look at the same situation completely different than another. And you just kind of hope at the end it works out, right, when it matters. And I'm interested more how this thing shakes out May 16th instead of March 16th, right, when we're nearing postseason baseball. So pretty good overall conversation there, I think. Anything else you want to touch on the weekend? Noles are up to number 10 and 11 in the polls. Those are fickle, man. Like, you'll drop and you'll skyrocket depending on weekend to weekend. And still just a marketing tool, in my opinion, at the moment, until we get closer to the end and people are showing me RPIs and whatnot. And I'm like, guys, the RPI doesn't matter right now until mid-April, like, get me to April before you start looking at it. And someone was like, oh, they're number 2 in the RPI, Florida State. And then I said, yeah, and Cincinnati's number 8. And, there's a West Coast team that's at 6. And, yeah, that's not right now. You got to play a lot of games before that really factors. And what I will say, and I'll wrap up this conversation on Wake, and then we'll preview Bethune-Cookman. You've wiped away the weekend in Arlington, in my opinion. That's a complete negation now. You negated it. And sweeps like this are huge feathers in your cap, massive for the resume. When we look at this thing in May and in June, and they start looking, on Selection Monday, and they put together the national seeds and the regional hosts, you may look back at this weekend and say, that was a big resume boost for Florida State, was the 3 wins on the road at Wake. And I'm pretty positive if you listen to the committee chair, who this year is Michael Alford, your athletic director, he might tell, when they ask him on ESPN, what was the difference here and here, he may point to series victories and then sweeps and say, well, Florida State has one of the loudest weekends in college baseball, right? And that's sweeping a number 12 Wake Forest, assuming that Wake finishes the year as a pretty good baseball team in the top 25 for most of the rest of the season. But yeah, man, it's a big weekend. This is the type of resume builder on top of what we're breaking down with the lineup and the staff and kind of maneuvering through the season as it happens in real time. This is the overall resume boost type of win. And brother, you're at 3-0 in the ACC to start. That hasn't happened in a long time, I feel like, for Florida State. And you're talking, if you take 2 or 3 against NC State at home, you're 5-1 after 6 games. And that puts you pretty high up in the pecking order as you kind of maneuver through this thing. So you've at least bought yourself some leeway and done yourself a huge favor with the resume and the overall season record and conference standings.
Yeah, I definitely don't look at RPI, the standing in it this early in this season either. But, just with the way that RPI works and how much it favors like road games, unless Wake Forest were to fall off of a cliff, like, you can lock in 3 quad 1 wins there, because it's 1 through 60 is a quad 1 win, like playing an opponent ranked 1 through 60. That gets you a quad 1 win on the road. So you lock in 3 of those right there. And we know how much they mention quad 1 wins when you get to that point of the year. And they're talking about, especially with the hosting, if you're in that conversation, that number is always incredibly important. But the only other thing I was going to add on this series, and it's something that we've said on here a bunch of times, like, it's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think. After Tuesday, the world was ending and the season was over. And after this weekend, everybody thinks this might be one of the best teams in the country. It's probably somewhere in between those. Maybe Wake's not as good as everybody thought. I mean, FSU was really the first real team they had played. But, I think the pitching staff, the weekend rotation, they basically hit their ceiling this weekend. Are they going to be able to do that every weekend? Probably not. But you have to celebrate the wins when you get them, and that's a really, really, really impressive series and a really impressive weekend to go on the road to Winston Salem and do what you did, and you got to tip your cap to that. But now you move on to another 4-game week and another really tough ACC series, which is just part of many, many tough ACC series this year. So still a long way to go, but definitely encouraging first weekend of ACC play.
No doubt. And it's going to always count on the resume. And that's what I mean. Like at the end of the year, you're going to be able to look at this one and go, that really boosted the overall resume for Florida State. And so those are facts. Those stay with you no matter what. So took advantage of it. Big weekend. Hat tip to the Noles. Got the job done. That might be the best they'll look all year. We'll see if they can stay and play at that high level the rest of the week and the rest of the season, and this week especially when they play NC State on Friday through Sunday in Tallahassee, who's ranked 10th right now in the polls. But we'll get to that Thursday and talk about that later this week. I want to talk Bethune Cookman very quickly. Rematch of the Tallahassee regional opener from last year. You played Bethune twice last year, one in a midweek that was pretty close at 9-7. And then they played you pretty tough. They tied the game there. I want to say in the 3rd or 4th inning against you in the regional opener. Bethune's they're nothing to really laugh at, man. That's the SWAC preseason favorite again. They're 14-6. They've already beaten USF and FGCU on the year. They were tied 2-2 with Miami a couple weeks ago into the 7th inning down there in Coral Gables. And they got a lot of guys back, and coach does a phenomenal job for them, Jonathan Hernandez. And they're going to be older. They're going to play hard. They play scrappy. They got a lot of state of Florida kids, which means these are kids who played baseball and are from South Florida. A lot of guys who played at Miami-Dade, in the JUCO ranks. And should they beat you? No. But can they push you? And if you're not ready to play, well, can they spring an upset? They can, and they could very well be back in your regional again at the end of the year if that's how it shakes out. But 14-6 right now, top team in the SWAC, same conference as FAMU, Florida A&M, in a rematch of the regional Tuesday, 6:00. That's tomorrow on ACC Network Extra. I'm back on the call, and Chip Baker, big shooter's back in the booth. So Chip Baker back in the saddle on the broadcast. That should be a lot of fun. But Brett, what do we need to know about the Wildcats of Bethune?
Yeah, I was really impressed with them last year in the regional and how they kind of stood up to the teams that they were playing and almost were able to grab a win against Northeastern, but I think they ended up losing a pretty close game to go 0-2 in the regional, but they were pretty dang competitive with FSU and Northeastern over those 2 games. And you said it, I think Hernandez does a really good job there and what he's able to build with their roster and competing for the SWAC every year at this point. The number that stands out to me with them is they've got 57 stolen bases so far this year in just 20 games. So they're going to try to get on base and they're going to try to run. Basically every single guy in the lineup this year has been running. They've got tons of guys over 4 stolen bases. 3 guys have more than 8 stolen bases. Sergio Rivera is 14 for 14 on stolen bases. So they're definitely going to try to run on FSU with the stolen base numbers against FSU at this point, no matter who's behind the plate, whether that be Shmelia or Carnes or even a Frommel if they were to give Shmelia a day off. But yeah, Bethune Cookman is no slouch, really. I don't know what type of stuff you'll face on the mound. Probably not that great, I would expect, at least after the starter. But it might be much different stuff than you faced the last 3 games or 4 games. So it could be, a pretty big speed change, which sometimes messes hitters up and their timing can get way off. So I'll be interested to see just how quickly they can make that adjustment. But you expect them to be able to do that as college hitters at this level. But yeah, coming off a sweep of Wake on the road, that could potentially be a spot where you're in a little bit of a lull, but you hope that they come out and take care of business the way that they should.
Especially with number 10 NC State on deck, one of the biggest series in Tallahassee this year. I think this will be the biggest one outside of the Miami one, and NC State's probably better than Miami. So Miami's the emotional series at the end, and NC State is the big matchup, right, that you get at home in a weekend series at least. And there's some other good teams, right? And I think Pitt's surprising some people. Duke's got a good ball club. They throttled Miami this weekend in 2 games. And, Notre Dame, I think, has got a pesky ball club too. But, this is probably your best weekend series of the year that's at Hauser. And you know what stinks, Brett, is that it's spring break for the students for this series. And the Miami series happens after the semester ends. Not great. That's like 1,000 to 1,500 people that they can fit in for some of these. I don't think it's FSU's fault. I think it's the ACC who schedules it. They just falls. Yeah, the ACC is not doing FSU any favors, man. Like between the football schedule, between giving FSU Duke basketball while they were in winter break, FSU was in winter break. When Duke came to Tallahassee, I don't want to say it's intentional, but I'm not saying that it's not intentional. It's not tracking as accidental, if that makes sense. If we're adding 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. So you get NC State on spring break, which is rough, but still a big series, man. The kids will be locked in. I hope the Tallahassee locals come out and fire this thing up, and we'll preview this matchup. See if we can't get an interview with a player as well later this week. Encourage you guys to go back and watch the Noah Sheffield and listen to the Noah Sheffield interview. He dove in pretty nicely on a lot of things, including his relationship with his dad and Gary Sheffield. And I think you'll enjoy that conversation. But, Brett, if you got nothing else, I think we're ready to wrap up on this one and kick it off and pass it down to what? Let's do it Thursday maybe. We'll come back and preview what should be one of the bigger matchups, 10 versus 11. NC State versus Florida State. Any final thoughts from you?
I'm good.
All right. Well, then that's going to do it. I want to thank everybody for listening to Sunday Golds. I want to thank Alumni Hall and Metro Deli. I'm trying to edit as I'm producing and trying to host at the same time here. And please give us 5 stars. Give us a rating. Leave a review. Share this with your friends. Like and subscribe. All that good stuff. And we do appreciate you guys. Episode 172 is a wrap. He's Brett Nevitt. I'm Ariya Masudi. Thanks for all of you watching on YouTube as well. And we will talk to you very, very soon.